When they heard a horse bucking and falling, everyone rushed to see what was happening. But when they discovered that it was a weak and sick horse, everyone left immediately, except for a determined 15-year-old girl who dared to imagine what no one else would. She took the horse home, and what happened next left those who had rejected the horse stunned and regretful. The midday sun bore down mercilessly on the dusty stockyard, illuminating every crack in the old wooden fences and highlighting every drifting particle of dust. It was auction day, and the air buzzed with the heightened energy of buyers and sellers. Well-groomed, healthy 1 to 2-year-old horses filed into the auction house, their coats glossy and their heads held high. Buyers in wide-brimmed hats and shiny leather boots strode purposefully with pens in hand, their eyes sharp as they assessed each horse that passed. People jotted notes into pocket-sized notebooks, tugged at hat brims, and whispered opinions to one another. Fine horses earned confident bids. Sometimes playful competition broke out between buyers. It was a cycle of pride, money, and calculation. Away from the hustle and bustle, there was a stable that no passerby would have even glanced at. Inside was a frail, skinny horse, standing motionless, head bowed low, its dull coat covered in dust. Its ribs protruded sharply, and its weak legs bent as though even a slight breeze might knock it down. Its eyes were sunken and resigned, as though it had learned that to hope was to invite disappointment. It was a nameless horse, brought here by someone who either no longer cared for it or who believed it no longer worth the cost of feed. One man said with disdain that if he bought this horse, he would probably have to hire a truck to tow it back to the farm, as it would be difficult for this horse to walk, even though the farm was only a mile away. Another added with a cruel laugh that it would be better off taken straight to the slaughterhouse. The horse remained motionless, its sunken eyes showing no fear, just quiet resignation, as if it had grown accustomed to being ignored, unseen, and unloved. In the crowd, a young woman stepped forward with a determined gaze. Sophia, with blonde hair, wore a dirt-stained white shirt, faded jeans, and old riding boots that bore the marks of many long mornings and late afternoons at her family's farm. She wasn't here to invest in some future champion, bred from prestigious bloodlines. She had come merely out of curiosity, and perhaps the faint hope that she might find a horse that spoke to her heart. Her grandfather, Thomas, had taught her that greatness could hide in the unlikeliest places. He always said, "Never judge a horse by its appearance. Look deeper." Those words echoed in her mind. As Sophia wandered, her eyes skimmed over the horses for sale. Some were magnificent, powerful legs, shining coats, eyes bright with energy, but none held her gaze. None made her heart skip a beat. Then she reached the quiet corner and saw him. He stood still, head hung low, almost invisible in the shadows of disregard. Something stirred within her chest at the sight of his hopeless stance. His eyes, though clouded with resignation, held a spark. It was faint, but it was there. A tiny, hidden ember, needing only a gentle breath to ignite into a flame. A voice murmured behind her. "That one's a lost cause," a man said. "Wouldn't even pull a cart? Better off putting him down." Another snickered. Yet Sophia barely registered their scorn. Instead, she approached the pen, placing her hands gently on the rough wooden fence. "Hey there," she whispered softly. The horse flicked an ear, barely lifting his head to meet her gaze. In that silent exchange, Sophia felt something pass between them, an unspoken understanding that he had been seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in a long while. When the auctioneer's voice eventually turned to this neglected horse, it carried a note of embarrassment, as though apologizing for even offering him. No one bid. An uncomfortable silence fell. Eyes drifted away. Then Sophia's voice rang clear. "I'll take him." The words seemed to land with the force of thunder, startling the crowd into stunned whispers and laughter. She stepped forward without hesitation. The horse could have been hers for almost nothing. Handing over her meager savings, she closed the deal. "From now on, I'll call you Rocky," she said, gently holding the horse's lead rope. "You might not look like much to them now, but let's see what we can do." She ignored the jeers and headshakes. Let them doubt. She had learned from her grandfather that something special often lay buried under layers of hardship. The journey back to her family's ranch was slow and arduous. Rocky limped at times, his legs shaky and unsure. Several times, Sophia stopped to let him rest. They moved along dusty trails flanked by fields of dry grass and shrubs. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and purple. Her grandfather, Thomas, stood on the porch, arms folded, watching curiously as Sophia led Rocky into the yard. "What have you got there?" he asked, squinting at the horse's emaciated frame. Sophia's heart fluttered. He was a man of few praises. "He's mine," she said simply. Thomas walked slowly around Rocky, examining him with a critical eye. "Skin and bones," he muttered. "Going to take a lot of work, girl." Sophia nodded. "I know, Grandpa. I'm ready." He looked at her, seeing the determination blazing in her eyes, and nodded. "All right then. He's your responsibility." Sophia got to work at once. She offered Rocky fresh water and hay, speaking to him in gentle tones. She sat beside him as he ate, content to simply be near him and let him know he wasn't alone. In the following days, she rose before dawn, carefully mixing supplements into his feed to help him rebuild strength. Rocky, initially reluctant, began to eat more heartily. He seemed perplexed by kindness, as if uncertain how to respond to the absence of cruelty. Thomas observed from a distance, sometimes shaking his head, but often with a small, knowing smile. Slowly, under Sophia's patient care, Rocky's coat began to lose its dusty dullness. When she touched him, his muscles no longer flinched. Step by small step, she led him around the corral. They didn't rush. Some days were 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But Sophia never lost patience. She spoke softly to him, reassuring him. Over weeks and months, Rocky learned to trust her hand and her voice. Soon his coat regained a subtle shine, his ribs grew less prominent, and he stood taller. The first time Sophia tried to saddle him, Rocky trembled, eyes wide and fearful. She murmured softly, reassuring him, and did not push. The next day she tried again, and the day after that. On the 4th attempt, Rocky allowed the saddle without a tremor. Sophia's heart soared. Later that week, with infinite care, she eased herself into the saddle. He tensed, but then relaxed at her gentle encouragement. They walked slowly around the corral, horse and rider learning each other's rhythms. It was a small personal victory that brought tears to her eyes. By the following spring, Rocky had transformed. He would never be the biggest or the most imposing horse, but there was a quiet dignity about him now. He had a steady gait and alert eyes. Sophia decided it was time to face the world and entered him in a local equestrian competition. Word spread quickly about the miracle horse, the one no one wanted now standing proud beside a hopeful young woman. People scoffed, some smirked behind their hats, but Sophia ignored them. The day of the competition arrived. Sophia's heart hammered. She guided Rocky into the ring, and together they navigated the course. Though not perfect, they completed it smoothly. When the results were announced, they had placed 3rd. It was only a small local event, but for Sophia and Rocky, it was monumental. They had silenced some doubters that day. She leaned down, hugging Rocky's neck. "We did it," she whispered. "We showed them." In the weeks that followed, the equestrian community took notice. Whispers spread about the horse, once deemed worthless, who had now proven himself. Offers began trickling in, some startlingly large. Wealthy buyers promised Sophia more money than she had ever seen, but she refused them all. Rocky was not a commodity to be bartered. He was her partner, her friend. She had pulled him from oblivion and given him a chance to shine. No amount of money could buy that kind of bond. Next came the regional competition. This time the stakes were higher and the field more competitive. Sophia trained Rocky rigorously, but always with kindness. She never pushed him past what he could handle. On the day of the event, nerves fluttered in her stomach, but Rocky, sensing her calm voice and steady hands, performed admirably. They took second place, an astonishing achievement considering where he had started. Sophia felt tears sting her eyes at the awards ceremony. Rocky stood tall beside her, ears pricked forward. They had proven once again that a horse's worth was not determined by appearances. By now, the story of Sophia and Rocky had spread beyond competitions. Reporters came calling, intrigued by the tale of a horse saved from neglect and molded into a champion. Sophia gave careful interviews, always emphasizing what Rocky had taught her: patience, trust, and the importance of seeing potential where others saw only failure. She never claimed she alone made him great. Rocky had greatness within him from the start, and she simply helped him find it. As months turned into years, Sophia and Rocky climbed the ranks of equestrian sports. The national championship loomed on the horizon, a daunting challenge that would put them against the country's best horses and riders. Thomas watched from the ranch, pride glowing in his eyes. Sophia worked with professional trainers, refining Rocky's technique. She approached training with the same philosophy that had guided them from day one: patience, kindness, and consistency. On the day of the national competition, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Sophia gently patted Rocky's neck before entering the arena. She knew they were underdogs. She knew people watched and waited, some hoping they'd fail, others secretly cheering for the duo that defied expectations. The course was unforgiving. Tall jumps, tricky turns, requiring perfect timing and trust. They did not falter. Rocky's muscles rippled with newfound power as he soared over obstacles. Sophia's guidance was subtle. They moved as one. When they cleared the final jump without error, the crowd roared. When the results tallied, they had earned a silver medal, second in the nation, surpassing some prized stallions with impeccable bloodlines. Sophia led Rocky from the arena, tears sliding down her cheeks, not from disappointment, but from overwhelming pride and gratitude. They had come from nothing and proven themselves against all odds. The media frenzy intensified. Now, large breeding operations and wealthy patrons made even more extravagant offers for Rocky. They promised Sophia wealth, assured her that she could buy multiple top-tier horses. But Sophia never wavered. Rocky was not a transaction. He was living proof of the power of belief and perseverance. She refused every offer, her conviction unshakable. Little did she know a miracle was about to happen. This Christmas Eve was like those in years past, quiet, as Sophia and Thomas went into town to celebrate the holiday, unaware that a group of thieves had slipped onto the farm. Moving silently under the moonlight, they aimed to steal any livestock they could, including Rocky. The stables were dimly lit and quiet, but as the thieves approached, Rocky sensed their intentions. Without warning, he charged, his powerful hind legs slamming into one thief's chest. The man was thrown back, gasping for air, while the others froze in fear. At that moment, Sophia and Thomas returned, headlights sweeping the yard. The remaining thieves panicked and fled, leaving their injured companion behind. Gathering around her brave horse, Sophia felt immensely grateful that the once skinny, unwanted horse had now protected their farm, ensuring a peaceful Christmas. One evening, as the stars twinkled above the quiet ranch, Thomas sat beside Sophia on the old porch swing. "You know," he said, "this story of yours and Rocky's is something special. It might help a lot of folks to hear it." He handed her a worn notebook. "Write it down. Let people know what it took and why it mattered. Sophia did just that. Night after night, after feeding and grooming Rocky, she sat at her desk and wrote their story. She described his condition at the auction, the ridicule, the patience, and the slow healing process. She wrote about the first tentative steps toward trust, the small victories that led to greater ones, and included doubts and setbacks to show that their path was never guaranteed. When she finished, she published the book. It resonated with readers who knew what it meant to be overlooked and who yearned for someone to believe in them. In time, Rocky aged. Sophia decided it was best for him to retire from competition while he was still healthy and strong. She made sure he would spend his remaining years at the ranch, surrounded by familiar fences, soft pastures, and warm breezes. Visitors came, children, aspiring riders, curious people who wanted to see the legendary horse. Rocky greeted them calmly, allowing gentle pats or offered treats. He became a symbol of hope, an example of how destiny can be reshaped with kindness and dedication. Sophia often sat by the fence, watching Rocky graze lazily in the afternoon sun. Sometimes Thomas joined her, and they talked about all that had happened, the initial disbelief, the hard work, the triumphs. Sophia realized Rocky had inspired countless others, new riders who looked beyond appearances, farmers who gave a second chance to an animal in need, and individuals facing personal struggles who found courage in Rocky's story. As seasons passed, the world continued to change, but the legend of Sophia and Rocky remained a comforting constant. Competitions came and went, new champions rose and fell, but the memory of the weak horse who had been rejected at auction yet became a champion lingered. Sophia knew that what they had built was more than a record of wins. It was a narrative of compassion, courage, and trust. Every so often, Sophia received letters from strangers who had read her book or heard the story. They wrote to tell her how Rocky's journey had given them strength to face their own hardships. They said they saw life differently, understanding that potential can lie dormant, waiting for just one person willing to believe. Sophia answered every letter she could, grateful and humbled that her partnership with Rocky meant something beyond the arena. Eventually, as years stretched on, Rocky grew old and content. He spent his days in peace, and Sophia ensured he never lacked comfort or care. She still remembered the sneers at the auction, the pitying looks, the laughter. None of that mattered now. Rocky's worth was beyond measure. He had proven himself not just as a champion athlete, but as a champion of the spirit, reminding everyone that victory is not always measured by medals, but by the hearts one touches along the way. The final lesson Sophia carried with her was simple yet profound. True worth comes from within, and it can bloom under the right conditions: love, patience, and belief. The story of Rocky was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who understood that greatness can emerge from the unlikeliest of places. And so, as the sun set behind the rolling hills, Sophia stood at the paddock fence, watching Rocky enjoy a peaceful retirement. She smiled softly and called his name. The old horse lifted his head, flicked an ear, and trotted toward her with a gentle Sophia that belied his age. In that moment, time fell away, and all that mattered was the bond they shared, an enduring testament to the power of second chances, trust, and the quiet miracle of seeing value where no one else dared to look. After watching this story, do you think it's a great thing to help people and animals? There are many more true stories on the channel for you to enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to let us know you still love animals and their stories.